Project Management Mainline. Welcome to this quick review of one of the backbones of your PMP exam philosophies, and we call it the PMBOK Guide Mainline. I also refer to it as the Project Management Mainline because not only is this for your PMP exam, you could also use this to scale your PMBOK Guide dogma up or down. This is part of our PMP exam immersion series from Project Management Masterclass. You already know that project management is viewed through the lens of people, process, business for your PMP exam. And you know that 50% is process, 50% is focused on processes of project management. That could be agile, hybrid, or predictive. But there's an overarching flow of work that I want you to think about, whether you are looking at it through an agile lens, a predictive lens, or hybrid lens. It starts off with a vision of what needs to be done. It could be a product vision, it could be a need, but there's this vision, and it usually ends in a business case being worked on. In other words, conceptualization of an idea or a need, and there could be a feasibility study. In fact, a business case is known as an economic feasibility study. After the business case, there's usually an authorization, a chartering process. The chartering process, we know that as developed project charter. And after the chartering process and stakeholders have been identified, we then begin to plan at some level, either in an iterative fashion, such as in the world of Agile, or predictively, in a lot of detail, or at a high level, really depends. And then we could plan in stages, in iterations. As planning is happening, work is being executed. On a lot of projects, we plan for a little bit and then we do, like in the world of Agile. We plan and then we do. In the world of predictive, we plan a whole lot and then we do a whole lot. But as we're doing the whole lot in executing, we should also be involved in inspecting and checking, constantly checking things such as the daily Scrum, retrospectives, demos. All of those are vehicles for us to inspect and check. And then there is replanning and refinement on a lot of projects. Going into the exam, don't just think about planning as happening one time. You need to think about replanning. It's a big deal in the world of the PMI, and we have outputs from other processes going into that process known as develop project management plan. In the world of Scrum, we plan, we replan, we refine the backlog, we plan for the sprint as well. So planning also happens in the world of Agile, just in a different way. The demo, the delivery, terms such as sprint review and MVP and PSI, those should be well known by you for your exam. Ultimately, there's going to be a retrospective. There's going to be a lessons learned. There's going to be a review of what happened and looking for ways to improve. And this is the overarching idea that I want you to have, whether you are looking at the lens of Scrum, you're looking at the 3 roles, the ceremonies, the artifacts, you should be able to fit them into this high-level framework. In addition to this, you should also be able to see your 49 processes of the PMBOK guide in this lens as well. You should be able to look at any of these 49 and you should be able to tie each one back to one of the things happening at this high level. This is how I would advise you to proceed. Otherwise, you will be lost. If you're trying to tackle entire page 25, you will get lost. You got to break it down into pieces, break it into chunks, and from there, build in putting everything together. But don't try to put the entire thing together at one time. My advice is to take roughly 20% of these processes you see on the screen, and they're those highlighted yellow. Those highlighted yellow, we are going to put them through this high-level framework or cycle that I have put together here. And we're going to dress it up in such a way that you'll see how these core processes of page 25 interrelate. The core processes I am showing a lot of them are from integration. Those right there are integration. We have some from scope. We have one from quality. And there is one from stakeholder management. With this in mind, my friends, you should be able to plug and play any of the other processes into this map I'm about to show you. And that is why it is so priceless. You should be able to take any of these and plug them in to this main line that I'm about to show you. And this main line espouses Pareto's principle, Pareto's law, the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 rule, whatever you want to call it. But the bottom line is that 20% of the processes on this screen will give you an 80% return on your projects. And that 20% varies for different people. It really depends on your project. It depends on what flavor of a delivery method you're using. But ultimately, you should be able to take your 20% and you should be able to plug it into your project. So I want to give you an idea of how this looks. I call this the PMBOK guide mainline. And here's what the mainline is all about. It's taken the 5-10-49 configuration, whittling it down to a manageable, tidy piece that you can understand and build upon. So let's take a look. It starts off with a project charter. And the project charter is developed in a process known as Develop Project Charter. The main goal of this charter is to put everyone on the same page. So imagine a business that wants to embark on a project to build a new backpack. This backpack is going to do a lot for the business. Not only is it going to bring in new revenues, but it's also going to help people. It's also going to help people who are looking for a better solution than probably what they're using. On the screen, you see an example of a project charter. It's a very basic document. It defines the purpose for the project. Mention is made of the reason why the project is in existence. In other words, a case for the project. So you could think of the project charter pulling some items from the business case and from other relevant documents and put in a project charter with the core outlook for the project explained, the project objectives and the success criteria. We could also have the high-level timeline, milestones, high-level cost, high-level quality. We also have a key stakeholder list that exists in the project charter. All of this is what you're going to get from the very first process in the main line. And that's why Develop Project Charter is our very first one. Now, the Develop Project Charter process will output the project charter. That project charter will become an input to the process known as Identify Stakeholders. And out of Identify Stakeholders, we get a stakeholder register. The stakeholder register logs stakeholder information, and it's the beginning of cataloging the stakeholder information and later planning how to engage those stakeholders. But this is the very first stage where you think about your stakeholder list that comes from Develop Project Charter in the project charter. So I'm going to circle it on the screen right here just so that you are aware of what exactly happens here. This project charter contains your key stakeholder list, and your key stakeholder list becomes an input to Identify Stakeholders. And in Identify Stakeholders, this is where you flesh out that information. Now, let me share that with you on the screen here. Here is a sample of what a stakeholder register could look like. Stakeholder register, you can see we have the name of the stakeholder, what exactly they're doing on the project, the company they work for, and so on. You could take a look at this and say, this is identification information. But in addition to identification information, you could classify your stakeholders. You could say high level of power, high level of interest, or power impact, however you want to define it. But the bottom line is, in the main line, you should not forget to include the identification of stakeholders. Now, as you go through the main line, I want to challenge you to think about all the other processes and all the other knowledge areas and think about where you can plug these in. For example, where would you plug in planned stakeholder engagement? You could plug it straight in to identify stakeholders. Now, the project charter comes out of develop project charter and goes to develop project management plan. And that in turn goes to direct and manage project work, the process, direct and manage project work. But let's stop for a second and talk about the project management plan. Now, the project management plan contains several subsidiary plans. In other words, several smaller plans that cut across areas on the project, such as risk, schedule, quality, procurement, communications, and many more. Ultimately, we assemble these plans, and those all together make up the project management plan. Now, that goes to a process known as direct and manage project work. And out of this process, we get some rather important outputs that we'll take a look at shortly. But the project management plan forms the basis for this main line. As you can see, this project management plan goes to manage project knowledge, monitor and control project work, and all non-integration monitoring and controlling processes. But let's zoom in to this final entry here to show you that the project management plan actually goes to every process in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, with the exception of develop project charter and develop project management plan itself. All the other 47 processes use the project management plan as an input. Now think about that for a second, because that can save you tons of time on your exam. Just knowing that the project management plan goes everywhere except two processes is priceless, in my opinion. So pay close attention to that. The project management plan also goes to close project or phase. The project management plan also goes to control quality. Now, there's a rather interesting relationship here between direct and manage project work and control quality. Direct and manage project work gives you an output known as work performance data. That is your raw observation. Raw observations on the project, that's data. But that data needs to be analyzed in context across all of those monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration. So think about it like this. Right here on the far right side of the screen, I want you to think about work performance data going into all of those processes, every single one. Let's do that again. All of the processes outside of integration will take work performance data and use it as an input to them. And from these, you will get an output that goes directly in here. Now, I don't show it as clearly as this in the final image, and that's why I want you to pay close attention to this. So look at this as WPD going in to every non-integration monitoring and controlling process, WPI coming out of them and going into monitor and control project work. And one more thing, monitor and control project work will give you a work performance report. So what is the flow? The flow is data needs to be analyzed in the monitoring and controlling processes outside of integration. After analyzing raw observations, we get work performance information. And after you get work performance information, that needs to be whittled down into a report. Now, it could sound very abstract. So I want to break it down very simply for you. And I want to give you a practical example. So, work performance data. You're going out with your team, and there's a team building exercise to go to a particular ridge for a hike. You love to hike. So, as you set out on the hike, work performance data comes in. What is the work performance data? Traffic on the I-10. That's work performance data. It's a raw observation. Oh, there's traffic on the I-10. But that data is not good enough. That data needs to be analyzed. That data needs to give you actions to take. So if you just say, there's traffic on the freeway. Okay, so what am I going to do about it? I don't know if I should do anything about it. You see, it's just data. Now, for data to become information, you need to do an analysis. How bad is it? Is it bumper to bumper? How long will it take us to get to the ridge? That is where you begin talking about work performance information. You analyze the data, and you realize from the analysis of the data, it's going to take you an extra 45 minutes to get to your destination. Not only that, you're probably going to have to improvise with bio breaks because everyone in the department brought their kids along. So now you're realizing not only is there traffic, we're going to have big problems. And then perhaps there's a report. It's an ad hoc report sent back to management. Management report about the status. Now that is very, very simple. And I made it very simple because I want this to anchor back whenever you read the PMBOK guide. Data should become information, and that information should become some sort of report. It could be a fancy report with traffic lights and the red, yellow, greens, or it could just be a very ad hoc verbal report to stakeholders. So when you think about work performance data, work performance information, and work performance report, this governs a lot of the questions on the exam. In fact, it will amaze you at how many questions leverage your understanding that before you can solve a problem, you need data. And before you can solve a problem, you need to analyze the data. And you're likely to get some sort of report. Get it? And that report enables you to take necessary action. So that will be tested quite heavily on the exam. All right, now we've talked about WPD, WPI, WPR. Let's move on and see what else happens here. So going back to our map of the world of the main line, you can see that work performance data and deliverables both go to control quality. Now, we've already talked about WPD going into every process outside of integration that has the word monitor or control or is in the monitoring and controlling process group. Again, outside integration, don't forget that. But we see deliverables. And what is a deliverable? The deliverable is a product, a service, or result that the project was meant to deliver. Now you get this deliverable. It needs to be checked in control quality. So in control quality, you can see the ladies on that conveyor belt, they are meant to be checking the deliverable. That deliverable gets checked. And remember, we also talked about work performance information already. This is just showing it to you with specific reference to control quality. So keep that in mind. Verified deliverables is an output of control quality because if your deliverable is found to be fit for use, found to be good, then you will put a stamp of approval on it. And we call that a verified deliverable when the stamp of approval has been put on it. The next thing that happens here is the verified deliverable goes to your customer after you have deemed it fit to go to your customer. Here's the customer. What exactly is the customer doing here? Or your key stakeholder, such as the sponsor? Well, they are inspecting that verified deliverable. And as they inspect that deliverable, If they approve it, you will get an accepted deliverable. That signifies the stamp of approval of the customer. And you can see what happens. It then goes to close project or phase. It goes to close project or phase, and you get an output known as a final product, service, or result transition. That final product, service, or result transition is a terminal output. In other words, that signifies the end of the cycle. So the main goal of the project, once it has been authorized, is to add value to the customer. And how do you add value to the customer? Value is added in the delivery, the acceptance, the transition of the deliverable. And that, my friends, at a very, very high level, is what you are doing in the processes in the PMBOK guide. There's a little bit more. The final report is also an output because you want that final report, whether it was success or otherwise. Also, be aware that all those non-integration monitoring and controlling processes, they will give you WPI. We already looked at that. Now, we've already talked about work performance reports coming out of monitor and control project work, but they go to a number of processes, 4 to be precise. But we will only show one here, the perform integrated change control process. Also be aware that change requests are generated from a number of places, including those monitoring and controlling processes outside integration. Those give change requests like other processes do, but we want to call your attention to the fact that every change request is an input to perform integrated change control, and that is where it gets processed. Be aware of the big green main line, which supplies work performance data. I've already shown this to you, but here it is formally, WPD. Also be aware that deliverables is an input to the manage project knowledge process because we could learn a whole lot from our deliverables. So my friends, when you take a look at page 25 in the PMBOK guide, it is important for you to understand the main line, because from your understanding of the main line, you can plug and play. You could take manage quality, for example, and you could drop manage quality into the main line. And the question would be, where does manage quality fit best? And you know where it fits best? It fits best right here. As an example, manage quality. And what exactly is happening in managed quality? In managed quality, we are assuring our customers that indeed quality standards are being met, and we're doing other things. Making sure that quality standards are adhered to. We're doing a process analysis. So there is some interchange and interaction between these two, as you can see there. There's some interaction between control quality and manage quality, in that control quality gives you quality control measurements, and that goes to manage quality. You might have seen quality control measurements. Quality control measurements goes to manage quality. You get the idea. So for every process on page 25, you should be able to look at the process and plug the process in to the main line, because they all anchor into the main line. You know, the simplest of plugins to the main line, I'll show you. The simplest of plugins to the main line is as follows, and you build from there. You ready for it? Simplest of the plugins is this. If we take any process apart from develop project charter and develop project management plan, which are already on the screen, and you plug those processes in here. Take any process, it fits in here, apart from those two. For example, manage team. Manage team fits in here perfectly because the project management plan plugs into it. You get the idea? And from here, you can talk about other things that happen within the main line. For example, there is a direct link between monitor and control project work and manage team. What is that direct link? Work performance reports is an input to manage team. And there you have it, a connection. And I want you to think about all processes like this because you can plug a number of processes. Let me show you another example of what you could plug in here. Right here, you could plug in manage communications. Just like that. You see that? Because work performance reports go straight into it to manage communication. So you can distribute it. What about monitor risks? And from here, you can build associations. Another association that you could build for your understanding of these concepts, using this as an example, is the identify stakeholders process. So when you boil it down, you can show a link from here. The project management plan goes into identify stakeholders as well, because it contains plans used for identify stakeholders. Now you might say, but wait, isn't that meant to be initiated? It is. But remember, the project management plan is used also in identify stakeholders when you have gone downstream in the project and you're doing this for the second or third time. Think about that. See? And identify stakeholders is going to give you a stakeholder register. And we've kind of already seen that here, right? All the way over here. But that stakeholder register is going to go to a process known as plan risk management. You've seen how these things are connected? Plan risk management. And plan risk management is a process that gives you an output that becomes an implicit input to monitor risks. Is this making sense? And you know what that output is? The risk management plan, which is implicitly mentioned in the list of plans under your project management plan. And that is how anything in the 49 could be used to plug in and play. And there are thousands of permutations and combinations. If you want to know more about this in YouTube, just search for Phil's Matrix PMP exam, and you'll find different combinations that I've put in grids and so on. Now, I don't want you to get so distracted by the main line that you don't do anything else. I just want you to understand that instead of cramming a boatload of outputs and inputs and relationships, master this one relationship between all of these processes on the screen. They are not that many. Once you have mastered these, if you're looking to see how something else connects, plug it in, play it, and it will work. Take the top 10 from your world, map them out, and you see that they plug and play into the main line. Now, going back to our overarching ideas and thoughts of this bigger, higher level framework, if you will, because any methodology should be able to plug into this. The vision, the chartering, the planning, the executing, the inspecting, the replanning, the demo, the retrospective. Any model will fit into this. Another model that fits perfectly into this is Scrum, the very basics. What happens? There's a need, there's a vision. Put those needs, micro or macro, into the product backlog. The product backlog is a living document. It's one of the three artifacts of Scrum. We get to a point where we plan the sprint. We get our sprint backlog. Of course, this is worked on by the team. Sprint planning doesn't just happen with the product owner. The team is involved. Prioritize what needs to be done and take a section of the product backlog, becomes your sprint backlog. It's planned. And then away we go into the sprint. This could be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. Some companies might need longer sprints. Some companies may need shorter sprints. Some sprints might be even a week or days. As those sprints are taking place, we're going to have our daily Scrum ceremony. And this is a daily stand-up meeting. And the project manager in the world of PMBOK guide is not on this horizon. Instead, we have an entity called the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master's role is one of the three roles, very different from that of the project manager. Instead of churning out reports and managing stuff, the Scrum Master is a servant leader and a coach. The Scrum Master looks for opportunities to help remove impediments for the team. But the role of a project manager is very different. And there's nothing wrong with a Scrum Master role, and there's nothing wrong with a project manager role, but they are very different. And on your exam, you will be tested on that. So no project manager in this world of Scrum, but in the world of Agile, in your Agile practice guide, you see the PMI referring to the project manager as one of the alternate entities in any project arrangement. So they talk about the Scrum Master or the project manager or the facilitator. So you really need to look at this in an organic way on your exam. But you got to know Scrum 101. So the Scrum Master helps remove impediments, coaches a team. They own the process of Scrum and they need to make sure that it's being done right. So they coach team members. They need courage to do that. Scrum Master is not just an any old person that you throw a job to. It has to be someone who's solid. You will be tested on those philosophies. All right, so the team continues working. And while the team is working, right there while they're working, backlog refinement needs to be happening. Why? Because you are moving to the very next sprint as soon as you get done with this one. Ultimately, the team is going to crank out the PSI, the potentially shippable increment, which hopefully will double as an MVP. And the MVP is going to be used for feedback. But that's another story. So PSI, potentially shippable increment. MVP, the minimum viable product. You need to know those for your exam. But ultimately, there will be a sprint review where you demo the PSI, or the potentially shippable increment, also known simply as the increment, right? And everyone will be there, the product owner, the Scrum Master, the team. They also have, of course, stakeholders and people from the business who are there, because remember, this PSI is for them ultimately. And there's going to be a sprint retrospective ceremony at the end where you look back and ask the question as a team, how can we improve? What could we do better on? Are there any opportunities? It's very similar to a lessons learned, only more private. And that's the world of Scrum, a great tool to hang agile concepts and principles on as you study for your exam. So again, my friends, on your exam, you are going to be tested throughout on this overarching concept of the Stacy complexity model. When do you use predictive? When do you use agile? When do you use a hybrid? And by hybrid, we're talking about a combination of predictive, iterative, incremental, and or agile approaches. In other words, you could have agile followed by predictive or agile and predictive simultaneously, or you could have agile with a small injection of predictive or predictive with a small injection of agile. And the ultimate idea is you find the perfect blend on a continuum. And on that continuum, you could be either more predictive or more agile, or entirely predictive or entirely agile. It really depends on the project. But on your exam, expect to find terms such as incremental, agile, change driven, iterative, predictive, fully plan driven. You need to be very comfortable with these terms. Again, you can find this on page 19 in the Agile Practice Guide, and I would highly recommend mastering this concept. Also, the Stacy complexity model, you can find this on page 14. All right, you can find this on page 14 of the Agile Practice Guide. So I would highly recommend you to take a look at that. Make sure you understand it. And it's only going to help you the more as you prepare for your exam. Remember, if you're looking for training and coaching for your PMP exam, you need to go onto our website. It's Praizion.com, Praizion.com. It's going to help you. Thank you very much for joining me. You got any questions, let us know. All the very best on your exam.